My family thought I was finished. At 63, childless and widowed, I was a shadow in my brother's home, just a burden, a name on a forgotten will. My days were quiet, filled with long silences and muffled cruelties. I had no voice. No one listened when I cried. But then something happened. Something impossible. The kind of thing people whisper about behind closed doors. I found out I was pregnant. At 63. And the moment that child stirred inside me, everything changed. Abuse turned to violence. Silence turned to screams. And the house I had once called home became a prison of shame and fear. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. Because the child growing inside me wasn't just a miracle. It was a reckoning. Let's begin. My name is Evelyn Mareaux, and for the past 6 years, I've been a ghost in my brother's house. Every morning, I stirred my tea with the same silver spoon, careful not to make too much noise. The walls in Gerald's house are thinner than they look, and Meredith, his wife, had ears sharper than any dog. I knew the routine by heart. Wake early, clean before they woke, stay out of the living room until 10, and never, ever use the nice cups. That morning was like any other. Or so I thought. I sat at the kitchen table, watching the steam curl from my chipped mug. The spoon clinked once too loud. I winced. From upstairs, I could already hear Meredith's slippers dragging. She'd come down soon, and I would fade, as I always did, into the background. It was better that way. I was safer in silence. But something felt different that day. A strange warmth pulsed in my stomach. Not pain, not illness, something deeper, like a quiet flutter. I reached down instinctively, resting my palm against my belly. Getting fat now, are we? Meredith's voice cut the air like a blade. I looked up. She stood by the door in her satin robe, sneering at the slice of bread on my plate. Didn't think you'd outgrow your morning clothes, but here we are. I didn't reply. There was no point. Words only fed her cruelty. Gerald came down next. My brother. Once, he was my protector. Now he barely met my eyes. Morning, he muttered, grabbing the paper, sitting down like a king in his castle. No nod, no warmth. Just silence, cold and suffocating. And then came the boy Lance. 17 and soulless. His mother's eyes, his father's detachment, and a grin that made my skin crawl. Morning, Auntie Eve, he said in that mocking tone he'd perfected. I looked away. That strange flutter returned. Deeper this time. Stronger. It was just after breakfast, when Meredith sent me to scrub the guest bathroom, that the wave hit me nausea so sudden I dropped to my knees on the tiled floor. My hands trembled. My skin went cold. By noon, I was sitting alone at the local clinic, wearing a borrowed coat and gripping a plastic cup in my hand. The nurse called my name. I went in, explained the symptoms, expecting a stomach bug or worse, maybe some tumor, some final disease to put me out of my misery. But when the doctor returned, his face was pale. Evelyn, he said softly, I ran the tests twice. You're pregnant. I stared at him. I'm what? Pregnant, he repeated. About 5 weeks. It's medically remarkable, but not impossible. We'll need to do more tests. But there's no mistake. I couldn't breathe. At 63, broken and forgotten, I was pregnant. And somehow I already knew this child would change everything. When I stepped off the clinic bus and onto the cracked pavement of Maple Street, the world around me felt unreal. Cars passed. Children screamed at a park across the road. Clouds drifted. All of it normal. Ordinary. But not me. Not anymore. I walked slowly, one hand pressed against my stomach, though there was nothing to feel yet, just a whisper of life. A flicker. But it was mine. I don't remember entering the house, not really. The scent of bleach from the morning's scrubbing still hung in the hallway. I moved like a thief, shoes quiet on the tiles, hoping to reach my bedroom without being seen. But of course, luck has never been a friend of mine. Meredith stood in the kitchen archway, arms folded. You're late, she said. Where have you been? I held up the clinic brochure in a shaking hand. Doctor's appointment. Another one? She rolled her eyes, snatching it from me. You're like a hypochondriac hamster, always running off to get poked. I opened my mouth, wanted to say something, anything, but my tongue betrayed me. How do you say something like I'm pregnant at 63 to a woman who thinks you're one step above a stray dog? So I did the one thing I always do. I walked away. Later that evening, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the ceiling. My room smelled like mothballs and lavender, the only two things in the world that still listened to me. In the drawer next to my bed was the sonogram slip the doctor had given me and signed, "Not yet real." I hadn't cried yet. I hadn't screamed. I hadn't even smiled. But I pressed my fingers against my belly again and whispered to the child inside me. You don't know what kind of place this is, I said. But I'll keep you safe. Somehow, the next day, everything fell apart. Gerald was in the den, flipping through old record sleeves, when I gathered my courage. I waited until Meredith was out back, pruning roses with scissors that looked more like weapons than tools. Gerald, I said, gently. I need to tell you something. He didn't look up. I'm pregnant. Silence. Then he laughed loud, sharp, like he didn't hear me right. I'm serious, I said. I went to the clinic. I took the test. Twice. His smile faltered. You're not serious. I am. His face changed then, flesh stiffening, jaw tightening. Jesus, Evelyn. You've lost your mind. I haven't. It's real. They said it's rare, but possible. He stood, suddenly angry. With who? Who would even? He didn't finish. His eyes searched mine, full of accusation. Is this some desperate ploy for attention? For sympathy? No. Then what? Some miraculous conception? Are you expecting me to believe God handpicked you? The door opened behind me. Meredith entered, eyes narrowed. What's this about God and miracles? She's pregnant, Gerald muttered, walking past her. Apparently. Meredith stared. And then she laughed, a long, venomous cackle that echoed through the whole house. You poor, deluded hag. I saw the proof, I whispered. I'm not lying. She stepped closer, her perfume thick and bitter. You should be institutionalized. And don't think for a second you'll raise some devil child under our roof. This ends now. I backed away, but inside me, the flutter was stronger than ever. And I knew this was only the beginning. By morning, there was a new lock on my bedroom door, but it wasn't for my safety. It was to keep me in. I knew at the moment I turned the knob and heard the metallic click from outside. Meredith's doing, of course. Gerald was too cowardly to hammer anything on his own, especially not against the sister he once promised to protect. I stood in my dim little room, eyes darting between the door and the narrow window I was far too old to crawl through. My heart raced, not because of the lock, but because of what it meant. They believed me now. And instead of support or shock or even silence, they responded with control. I wasn't just an embarrassment anymore. I was a threat. Outside my door, I could hear them murmuring. Gerald's low, tired voice. Meredith's sharper, more venomous. I pressed my ear against the wood. She's delusional, Meredith snapped. 63 and pregnant? That's not a miracle, it's madness. Who knows what she's planning? What if it's a scam? She's not capable of scams, Gerald muttered. She barely speaks to anyone. Exactly. She's been stewing in that room for months. You don't think she could have gotten knocked up just to trap us? For sympathy? For money? I don't think she would. You just don't see it because she's your sister. Their footsteps moved away. I stepped back and sat slowly on the edge of the bed. The mattress squeaked beneath me. My hands trembled, not with fear, but something heavier, betrayal. They weren't confused. They weren't concerned. They were strategizing. I reached into the drawer where I had hidden the folded clinic paper and the sonogram slip. They were still there, crumpled but intact. I smoothed them gently on the bedspread. For a while, I just sat there, listening to the sound of my own breathing and the quiet tick of the old clock above my dresser. Outside, the world moved on. Birds called. The wind rustled leaves. But in this house, I was no longer Evelyn. I was a problem to be handled. That afternoon, the door opened for the first time. Meredith entered, holding a tray like a prison guard, plain soup and water. "No salt," she said. "Wouldn't want to endanger your miracle." I didn't speak. She set the tray down and looked at me, her lip curling. "What do you think is going to happen, Evelyn?" "That you'll give birth to some glowing child and we'll all fall on our knees and beg forgiveness." I stared back. "Because that's not how this ends," she whispered, leaning close. "You're a parasite. And whatever's growing inside you, if anything, is just another mouth we didn't ask for." She slammed the door behind her. But that night, as the house slept, I felt it again, that flutter. Stronger this time. Not just a flicker, but a pulse. A rhythm. I placed my hand over my belly and closed my eyes. "You're real," I whispered. "And they're afraid of you." I didn't know how I knew that. But I did. Something had begun. Something even they couldn't lock away. I stopped marking the days. Time lost its shape when you're locked away, when meals come like clockwork but warmth does not. The house had become quieter, or maybe I had just learned to hear different sounds. The creak of old wood. The hiss of the water heater. The whisper of my own thoughts trying not to turn into screams. I wasn't entirely alone, though. At night, I heard something else, something behind the walls. It started 3 nights ago, just after midnight. A tapping, rhythmic, soft, but not random. It came from the far corner of my room, near the heating vent where dust collected like secrets. I pressed my ear against the wall and waited. Tap. Pause. Tap. Tap. Long silence. Then a final tap. I couldn't explain it, but I wasn't afraid. Somehow it calmed me, like someone was telling me they were there, that they knew. The next morning, Meredith brought me another bowl of flavorless soup and a bitter smile. Her robe wasn't tied properly, and her eyes looked strained. She set the tray down harder than usual. "Strange dreams lately," she muttered to herself, then louder to me. "You're not doing anything weird in here, are you?" I didn't respond. But I noticed something. Her hand was trembling. She slammed the door again, but this time she paused for just a moment too long, like she wanted to say something else and chose not to. Or like she heard something she couldn't name. Later that afternoon, Gerald came to the door and knocked, an unusual courtesy. "Evelyn," he called, his voice quieter than usual. You've got an appointment." My heart skipped. "What kind of appointment?" "With a specialist. Meredith found someone who can evaluate this situation." Discreetly. "Evaluate?" I asked. "This isn't a condition, it's a child." "We just want to be sure," he said. "Please, Evelyn. We'll take care of everything. But we can't let this go on without understanding what's really happening." I didn't reply. I couldn't. Because I already understood what was happening. That night, the tapping returned. But this time, it wasn't just tapping. It was a voice. Faint. Female. Just beyond the wall, whispering, not in English, not at first, but in tones I recognized, like lullabies from a dream I'd long forgotten. Then, just as I began to cry without realizing it, I heard the words form clearly. "You are not alone." I gasped, stepping back from the wall. And just then, a picture frame fell from my dresser, crashing loudly to the ground. The sound must have woken them. I heard hurried footsteps, then Meredith's voice behind the door. "What are you doing in there?" But I didn't answer her. I couldn't. Because I wasn't alone anymore. Someone or something was here, watching over me. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel powerless. I felt chosen. The next morning, I awoke to find the broken picture frame still on the floor. It had held the only photo I kept to one of me and my late husband, Julian. We'd taken it 35 years ago, by the sea, before the miscarriages, before the cancer, before the long stretch of lonely years that followed. The glass was shattered. His half of the photo had torn clean off. It felt like a message. I knelt to pick it up, and the moment my fingers touched the torn edge, I felt that same strange flutter inside me, only this time it was accompanied by warmth spreading through my chest. I couldn't explain it, but it was as if something unseen was reminding me, you're still part of something that matters. Then I noticed something odd. The mirror. It was small, cracked at the edge, hanging crookedly above my dresser. But the reflection didn't match the room. It was subtle at first. The way the shadows shifted wrong. The light fell differently. And then I saw it, something standing just behind me in the mirror's edge. Not quite a figure. A shape. A presence. I turned. Nothing there. But when I looked back into the mirror, I swear it smiled. Not with a mouth. Not like that. It was a feeling. A knowing. That night, Meredith brought in my dinner with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Not anger. Not cruelty. Fear. She didn't say a word. She just placed the tray down and stared at me for a long moment, as though she expected me to say something, or expected me to be someone else. Before she could leave, I finally spoke. You've seen it too, haven't you? Her fingers tightened on the tray. I don't know what game you're playing, she snapped, but her voice cracked in the middle. But you'll regret it. She turned to leave. It's not a game, I said softly. And I'm not alone in this room. She slammed the door again, but it was weaker than before. The house was beginning to shift. The things they thought they controlled, me, my body, my silence, they were slipping out of their grasp. That night, I lit the small candle I kept hidden in my drawer. I hadn't touched it in years. I don't even know why I brought it with me when I moved in. Perhaps some part of me always knew this time would come. I set it on the windowsill and sat by it, watching the flame flicker. And then, in the soft orange glow, I saw her. A woman. Standing just at the far edge of the room, near the corner where the wallpaper peeled slightly. Her face was blurred, her hair long and gray like mine. She looked familiar, and yet impossibly distant, like someone pulled from memory and placed into form. She didn't speak. She just pointed. Downward. To my stomach. And then she vanished. No terror. No screams. Just silence and understanding. This child inside me wasn't a curse. It was an answer. And whatever force had placed it there, it wasn't done yet. The following day, I found something I wasn't meant to. It started with a draft. The room was still. No windows open. No vents blowing. But there it was, a sudden breeze across my neck, like breath from an unseen mouth. It made the curtains stir gently, and with them, something shifted in the wall behind my dresser. I followed the feeling like a thread through a maze. I pulled the dresser back, an effort with my aching joints, but behind it, I found something odd, a square-shaped slit in the paneling, maybe the size of a shoebox. And inside it, wrapped in faded cloth, was a book. Old, heavy, bound in cracked brown leather. I opened it with trembling fingers. No title, no author, just hand-scrawled notes, sketches, symbols I didn't recognize. Some pages were in Latin. Others were in English, but barely readable, like someone had written them in the dark during a storm. But one page stopped me cold. A drawing faint but clear. A woman, older, pregnant, surrounded by light, and above her, a winged shape, neither angel nor beast, something in between, hovering protectively. Below the image, a line was etched in faded ink. When they curse her womb, the house shall tremble. When they silence her mouth, the walls shall speak. I shut the book quickly and held it to my chest. It was about me. It had to be. I don't know how long I sat there before I heard a noise outside my door, soft footsteps, then the familiar rattle of keys. I shoved the book under my mattress and stood just in time to see the door creak open. Lance stood there, my nephew. 17, sneering as always, but there was something different in his eyes this time. Curiosity. He stepped into the room without asking. "Hey, Miracle Mama," he said with a grin. "Heard you've been talking to ghosts now." I didn't reply. He circled the room slowly, eyes scanning every surface. "Mom and Dad think you're dangerous. You know that, right? They're thinking of sending you away. Some clinic up north." He picked up my cracked mirror and looked at his own reflection. "I don't think you're crazy though," he said, too casually. "I think you're hiding something." Then he turned to me and smiled wider. "But that's okay. I like secrets." He stepped close, too close, and whispered, "I'm going to find out what it is. And when I do, it won't be yours anymore." I didn't flinch. I looked him straight in the eyes. "You won't survive it." He blinked, startled, just for a second. Something behind my words had shaken him, and I hadn't even meant to say it. It felt like someone, or something, was speaking through me. He backed away, muttering a curse, and slammed the door shut behind him. I locked it again. Then I pulled the book from beneath the mattress and turned to the next page. There, written in blood-colored ink, was a list of names. All women. And every one of them was marked as blessed, cast out, or vanished. I wasn't alone. I was part of something old. And they were coming for me. But something else, something stronger, was coming for them. The night that followed felt different. The house, once thick with silence, had begun to breathe like an old animal waking from hibernation. I could feel it beneath my feet, in the walls, in the faint echo of every footstep that wasn't mine. The book I'd found still lay open beside me on the bed, whispering truths through its ink. I hadn't slept. I didn't dare. Each time I closed my eyes, I heard soft voices, chanting, calling, singing. They weren't frightening, though. They were comforting. They were preparing me. Just before dawn, I felt it again, a deep pressure in my lower belly. Not pain, just weight, gravity, life. My hands shook as I reached down and pressed gently. And for the first time, I felt it. A kick. Not imagined. Not a flutter. A full, deliberate movement. The baby was growing fast, faster than any normal child. My breath caught in my throat. I whispered aloud, "Who are you?" The mirror across the room didn't answer, but the candle I had lit earlier flared up, high, like a flame fed by wind, though the air was still. Then, suddenly, the entire room began to tremble. It started in the floorboards. A low hum, almost musical, then a rumble, like distant thunder beneath the earth. The dresser shook. The lamp beside my bed tipped and crashed. The candle blew out. The house was trembling. From outside my door, I heard shouting. "What the hell is that?" Gerald's voice panicked. "Is it an earthquake?" Meredith screamed. "No, it's just her. It's coming from her room." They pounded on the door, but I didn't move. Because I understood now. They weren't afraid of me. They were afraid of what was coming through me. I stood slowly, cradling my belly, and walked to the mirror. My reflection didn't match my posture. It stood straighter, taller, glowing faintly around the edges. My eyes in the glass were golden, not gray. And then the reflection smiled at me. Not a warning, not a threat, a welcome. I whispered, "I'm ready." The trembling stopped instantly. From the hallway, I heard Lance's voice now. "Dad, what if she's cursed? What if that thing inside her is not even human?" And then Meredith, quietly terrified, "We should have never let her stay." It was too late. I stepped back from the mirror and turned toward the bed. The book was now open to a new page I hadn't seen before. It read, "When the house shakes, they will tremble. When she walks, the ground shall follow." I sat down slowly, holding my belly in both hands. This child was not a punishment. It was a prophecy. By morning, the house pretended nothing had happened. The floorboards stopped trembling. The furniture stood still. The walls no longer whispered. But I knew better. They were watching me more closely now. Meredith brought breakfast with shaking hands. She didn't meet my eyes. Gerald stood behind her, saying nothing at all, like he was scared his own voice might summon something worse than silence. The book was hidden now, tucked behind the panel again, too sacred to be discovered. But its words echoed in my mind. I knew them by heart. When the house shakes, they will tremble. And they were trembling. I could see it in the corners of their eyes, in the way they avoided the mirror in my room, in the way they now knocked before entering, even though they'd locked me in like a prisoner. That afternoon, I heard the conversation through the thin walls. We have to do something, Meredith hissed. The child is not normal. We don't know that, Gerald whispered. You heard what happened last night. That wasn't a storm, that was her. I think we need help, real help. Spiritual, maybe. Don't you dare bring religion into this house, she snapped. We buried God with your mother. There was silence, then a shuffling of papers. She found the room, Meredith whispered after a pause. That's what started all this. What room? The old nursery. Upstairs. The one we sealed off when we bought the house. My mother warned us never to open it. I froze. A sealed room? I had never been beyond the second floor. My room, the bathroom, and the narrow staircase leading nowhere I was allowed. But now, I had to know. That night, when the house slept and the lock on my door was left half-latched, maybe by accident, maybe by fate, I slipped into the hallway and climbed the staircase in darkness. Each step creaked like a scream. At the top was a door. Faded blue. Dusty. With old yellowing newspaper clippings pasted haphazardly across the wood. Stories of missing women. Unexplained pregnancies. Stillbirths followed by strange phenomena. I touched the knob. It turned. The room was cold. Ice cold. Yet I stepped inside without hesitation. Everything was untouched. A cradle in the corner. A rocking chair. A wall of faded floral paper. And there, on the far side, a mural, barely visible now. A woman. Pregnant. Arms outstretched. And above her, a shape in the sky. Not quite angel. Not quite human. I stepped forward, lightheaded, when I noticed a single word carved into the base of the mural, hidden beneath layers of peeling paint. Evelyn. My name. I stumbled back. And in the cradle, something stirred. I didn't scream. I approached. Inside, wrapped in a blanket that had not been touched in decades, was a single feather. Large. Silver. Still warm. I picked it up, trembling. Something sacred had been waiting in this room. For me. I turned to leave and saw Meredith standing at the doorway. Pale. Shaking. Eyes full of hatred. You were never supposed to come up here, she whispered. I held up the feather. Then why did it know my name? She said nothing. But behind her, I saw the mirror on the hallway wall crack, spontaneously, violently, without a single hand touching it. And Meredith backed away, terrified. I descended the stairs slowly, the feather in one hand, the child inside me pulsing with heat. Whatever they were hiding, it was already awake. I hid the feather beneath my pillow. It radiated warmth like a living heart. Every time I touched it, a strange calm washed over me, a silence inside the storm. But it wasn't just comfort. It was energy, memory. I could feel things when I held it. See them, even in brief flickers behind my eyes. The women. All of them. Faces I didn't recognize. Voices I never heard. But their stories echoed, too fast to catch in full, too powerful to ignore. All of them connected by one thing, the child. This child. And now it was my turn. That evening, Meredith didn't bring my food. Gerald did. He didn't speak. Just placed the tray down and lingered, staring at me longer than necessary. I looked him dead in the eyes. You knew about that room, I said. His lips parted, but nothing came out. You let her lock it away. Why? He looked down, then back at the door like he was afraid it would open behind him. Our mother, he whispered. Before she died, she said that room held things that don't follow rules. That the woman who last used it, our grandmother, was touched by something unnatural. I held the feather tighter behind my back. And what about me? I asked. Do you think I'm unnatural? I don't know what to think, he said. But the night you moved in, the air changed. Meredith didn't want you here because she said your grief would attract things. My grief? I laughed bitterly. What about yours? He didn't answer, just left in silence. That night, I woke to find the room glowing. Not from a lamp, from the feather. It pulsed like a heartbeat under the pillow. When I touched it, I saw a vision, not a dream. A memory that wasn't mine. A forest, a woman, ancient and powerful, standing barefoot in snow, her stomach swollen with life. And before her, a circle of people kneeling, not in fear, but reverence. She raised the feather in her hand, and it burst into flame, white and cold. They didn't run. They welcomed the fire. I gasped and dropped it. The feather didn't burn me, but my fingers tingled like they'd touched lightning. I clutched my belly. The child inside me kicked again, harder this time. And then, from the hallway, I heard footsteps. Not one pair. 3. Someone was coming. I quickly shoved the feather into the drawer and sat on the bed, steadying my breath. The door creaked open. Meredith, Gerald, Lance. Together. None of them spoke at first. Their faces were pale, but not sad. Determined. Meredith stepped forward. We've made a decision, she said. My chest tightened. You're sick, Evelyn. You've been hallucinating. Talking to things that aren't there. Claiming to carry a child that no one else has seen. I have the sonograms, I said. She waved her hand. Those can be forged. I laughed once, dark and low. You're scared. No, she said, but her voice cracked. We're acting out of love. You need help. Tomorrow morning, you're leaving this house. Where? A private facility. Clean. Peaceful. Secure. A prison, I whispered. Gerald looked away. Lance grinned faintly, as if this was a game he had already won. I looked at each of them in turn. Then, slowly, I placed my hand over my belly and whispered, You'll regret this. The room dimmed. The lamp beside the bed flickered. And the mirror on the wall behind them shattered, exploding outward with a piercing crack that sent glass across the floor. They all screamed. I didn't move. You think you can lock away a miracle? I said calmly. You think you can bury a prophecy? They backed out in a frenzy. And I smiled. Because the house wasn't on their side anymore. It was on mine. They didn't speak to me the next morning. No tray. No words. Just the sound of movement downstairs, a hurried, frantic. Bags being packed. Phone calls made in hushed, clipped voices. The van they mentioned would come at sunrise, Meredith had said. A transport. A safe place. Somewhere far away where people like me could be treated. But I wasn't sick. I was awakening. And so was the house. Around midnight, I rose and lit the candle again. The flame burned straight upward, steady and tall, not flickering. I placed the feather beside it, and for a moment, the two glowed together, as if breathing the same air, pulsing in unison. And then the whispers returned. Stronger than before. More voices now. Stand. Claim. Burn what no longer serves. I wasn't afraid. I stood in the center of the room and closed my eyes. All at once, memories rushed into me, not mine, but ancestral, spiritual, something older than blood. Women chained in cellars, beaten for bearing what men feared. Women cast out from villages, burned as witches. And each time, the child lived. The flame survived. I opened my eyes, and the walls began to hum. I walked to the door and placed my hand flat against it. You are mine now, I whispered to the house. The lock turned on its own. I stepped out into the hallway, barefoot, the floor warm beneath me as though the house itself had awakened from a long, bitter slumber. Downstairs, Meredith's voice rose in panic. She's out, she's walking around. Gerald swore. Lance yelled something incoherent. I descended slowly, deliberately. They stood in the living room, frozen, staring at me as though I were a ghost. I looked nothing like the Evelyn they'd locked in a dusty back room. My skin glowed faintly. My hair, long and silver, moved though no wind blew. And my eyes, they were not mine anymore. "You don't belong here," Meredith whispered, stepping back. "You don't belong anywhere." I stepped onto the carpet and said nothing. And then, the fireplace roared to life behind me. No matches, no fuel, just flame, pure and wild. The feather in my hand caught fire. I didn't drop it. The fire climbed up my arm, wrapping me in white blue light, but it didn't burn. It felt like truth, like purpose. They screamed. The curtains blew inward though the windows were shut. The chandelier above trembled. And then, from the mirror across the hall, a voice spoke. Not mine, not human. The child is not a burden. The child is the reckoning. And just like that, the fire went out. Total silence. I stood untouched. The feather had vanished. Only ash remained. I looked at the three of them. Meredith shaking, Gerald pale, Lance hiding behind his father's back like a child. "I will leave this house when I choose," I said. Not before. Then I turned and walked up the stairs without another word. Back in my room, I sat calmly on the bed, the baby kicking steadily inside me. They wanted to lock me away, but the house had made its choice. And soon, the world would too. The next morning, no one dared approach my room. No knock, no breakfast tray, no threats or whispers behind closed doors. The hallway outside remained deathly quiet, as though the house itself had warned them not to disturb me again. It was better that way, because something inside me was changing quickly. When I stood before the mirror, I barely recognized myself. My skin, once thin and mottled from age, now looked restored. Not youthful, not unnatural, just whole. Like the decades of grief, neglect, and humiliation were being stripped away cell by cell. And my belly, it grew overnight. Not by inches. Not bloated. Not swollen in the way human pregnancies progress. This was different. A gentle curve the night before had become a full, undeniable presence beneath my robe by sunrise. And with it, the child moved with purpose. Like it knew what day it was. Like it knew what came next. I sat beside the candle, which had burned low but never gone out, and I whispered to the air, "What are you trying to become?" The candle flickered once. Then, from behind the dresser, came a soft thud. I turned, cautious, and slowly dragged the heavy oak frame aside. What I found made me gasp. A cradle. Not the broken one I'd seen in the nursery upstairs, but a new one. Carved with ancient symbols. Smooth, untouched wood. Rocking slowly, without a single push. I knelt. There was something inside. A folded cloth, deep red, embroidered with silver thread. Symbols I recognized now from the book. One meant protection. Another meant lineage. Beneath it was a vial of clear liquid. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. It was there in case they tried to harm me. Or the child. But they wouldn't dare now. Later that afternoon, I heard the front door slam. Then an engine. I peeked through the curtain. The van they'd promised had arrived, white, clinical, idling in the driveway like a hungry dog. But no one came up the stairs. No one knocked. Because they knew. This wasn't a house they could control anymore. It had sided with me. And it was growing. I lit the second candle that evening. The flames danced together in rhythm, casting tall shadows that moved like figures across the wall. I whispered their names: Meredith, Gerald, Lance. The shadows stilled, then twisted. Not violently. Not yet. But with warning. The house was watching them now, not me. And something told me they wouldn't all survive what was coming. I began hearing it the following night. A low hum beneath the floorboards. Not from pipes or faulty wiring. No, this was deeper, alive somehow. Like the heartbeat of the house had moved under my feet, spreading like roots beneath every plank of wood, every nail, every tile. It came in pulses. Steady. Almost musical. And with every beat, the baby moved in sync. We were no longer separate. We were one. By the third pulse, the cradle rocked again on its own gentle, like a lullaby only the house could hear. The cloth inside had shifted slightly, revealing something new, a small, black stone tucked into its folds. I picked it up. It was warm, engraved with a single word, anchor. I didn't know what it meant, yet. But the moment I held it in my hand, the hum beneath my feet grew louder, stronger. Downstairs, the opposite was happening. The house had begun to suffocate them. It started with the lights, flickering uncontrollably, then failing entirely. Next came the plumbing. Meredith screamed when the water ran black for a moment. I heard Gerald cursing as the dishwasher backed up and flooded the kitchen with foul-smelling water. Doors jammed. Clocks stopped. Phones rang without being touched. And the mirror, oh, the mirror. They had removed every mirror in the house except mine. I found them later, stacked in the garage like corpses. Covered in cloth, wrapped in plastic. Like they were hiding from themselves. That evening, Gerald knocked on my door. Softly, a child's knock. I opened it slowly. His face was pale, sunken. The man who once dismissed me now looked 10 years older. "I need to speak to you," he said. Privately. I stepped aside. He didn't enter. Just stood on the threshold, like he was afraid to cross it. "We're leaving," he said. "All of us. Tonight. We've made arrangements." I didn't answer. He rubbed his temple. "This house is wrong. I don't know what you did, or what's in you, but the walls, they talk now. At night. I swear I hear Mother calling me." I nodded once. She always did call to the weak. His mouth opened slightly, shocked. "I'm not here to hurt you, Gerald," I said calmly. "But this place no longer belongs to those who harm the innocent." "We didn't harm you. You imprisoned me." He stepped back like he'd been slapped. I closed the door gently. Behind me, the hum had turned into a soft chorus, like women singing far away. I walked to the cradle and laid the black stone back into the cloth. "Anchor," I whispered. "Hold me here." And then, without warning, the floor beneath me shifted. Just a single throb, like a muscle tightening. I staggered, breath catching, one hand on the dresser. The child inside me kicked again, hard. Urgent. It wasn't pain. It was awakening. Something was coming. Or someone. That night, I dreamed of fire again, but this time I was standing inside it. Not burning. Not afraid. Just surrounded by white flames that moved like waves. In the center of the fire, I saw the child whole and glowing, suspended in the air. Not a baby. Not a human shape. Something more. Something wrapped in light, with eyes that saw centuries. When I woke, I wasn't in my bed. I was lying on the floor, cradled in the candlelight. The air was thick with warmth. My skin shimmered faintly, and something itched on my collarbone. I reached up and felt it. Raised skin. Lines etched into my flesh. I rushed to the mirror. And there it was. A mark barely visible, glowing under the skin like embers. A symbol I recognized from the book. It meant chosen vessel. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Downstairs, chaos had begun. I heard Meredith yelling at someone on the phone, perhaps. Her voice cracked under pressure. I couldn't make out the words, but I didn't need to. The tone was one I'd heard before from desperate people trying to escape something they couldn't name. Gerald's voice followed, lower, angrier. Then Lance. His voice was rising, wild and erratic. I heard glass shatter. Then silence. Complete and unnatural. The kind of silence you only hear in churches before something divine or terrible descends. I stayed in my room. I wasn't ready yet. Instead, I sat at the cradle. The red cloth had unfurled completely now, revealing more symbols, forming a ring of protection. In the center sat the stone, now split, two pieces that pulsed softly, like breathing. And then, the air changed. Something was inside the room. Not a shadow. Not a ghost. A presence. I didn't need to look. I felt it behind me, watching, waiting. And then, a voice. Not spoken aloud. Not from the walls. From within. You have been marked. I swallowed hard. Why me? I asked aloud. Why now? Because they buried the others. But not you. I turned slowly, and in the mirror, I saw them. Women. Dozens of them. Lined in reflection, standing shoulder to shoulder behind me, each one bearing the same mark. Each one watching me with eyes full of knowing. Sorrow. Power. The house remembers, they said together. The blood remembers. And now you carry the flame. The candles flared. The wind howled through a closed window. And somewhere deep below, I heard the very foundation of the house groan. Not from age, but from rebirth. The house wasn't dying. It was waking up. And I was its heartbeat. I didn't leave my room the next day. I didn't have to. The house had begun to carry out its own justice. Walls moaned without wind. Objects shifted in the night. And the mirror, the only one left in the house, no longer reflected the present. It showed warnings. Flickers of things about to happen, visions drenched in shadow and storm. I saw Lance in one of them, standing over me with something in his hand, a knife, I think. But when he lunged, the image split like shattered glass, and he fell backward, swallowed by smoke. I blinked and the mirror went still again. My belly tightened. Another contraction. Not painful, but powerful. Rhythmic. It was too early, far too early, but I knew now that this child did not obey time. It obeyed only purpose. The mark on my collarbone burned faintly beneath my robe. When the knock came at the door, it wasn't soft. It was angry. Lance, open the damn door, he snarled. We know you've done something to this place. I said nothing. I've had enough of your freak show. The lights don't work. Mom hasn't slept in 2 days. And last night, Dad saw something in the mirror that wasn't real. We're done playing nice. He pounded on the door again. Harder this time. The candle on my dresser flickered dangerously, and the hum beneath the floor grew sharp, angry. I stood and stepped toward the door. Lance, I said through the wood, calm as water. Go back to your room. Make me. I'm not asking. And then, the lock clicked. But I hadn't touched it. The door swung open on its own. Lance stood there, shoulders squared, holding a crowbar. For a second, he looked so much like his mother, tight-lipped, full of venom, puffed up with fake courage. But his eyes betrayed him. He was terrified. Of me. He stepped into the room, and the air changed. The cradle creaked once. The feather reappeared, lying on the floor by the dresser. It had returned, and the mirror darkened. I'm not afraid of your tricks, Lance said. You're just some crazy old hag who thinks she's a witch. I turned to him slowly. No, I whispered. I never claimed to be a witch. You gave me that title when you locked me away. He raised the crowbar, just an inch, but before it reached shoulder height, something cracked behind him. The dresser split right down the middle. Wood splinters flew past me, but I didn't flinch. Lance dropped the crowbar, stepping back, stumbling. What the hell? The mirror lit up. And in it, he saw himself, not now, but younger. A child, crying in the same room, screaming for his mother. And Meredith, standing behind him, ignoring him. Cold, empty, twisting his ear, telling him to be a man. He gasped. Tears filled his eyes. He saw what he was made from. And he ran. Down the hallway, screaming. I stepped back into the room and closed the door gently. The cradle was still. The mirror went quiet. And I whispered to the child, they're breaking. Just like they broke me. But I wasn't broken anymore. I was becoming whole. After Lance fled, the house fell into a hush deeper than silence. Not a peaceful quiet. No. This was the kind that comes before a storm, the stillness before judgment, when the sky holds its breath and the world pretends it's not shaking. I didn't move from the cradle that night. The feather pulsed faintly on the floor, resting like a watchful sentinel. The candle's flame had turned blue, and the book, The one I thought I'd hidden behind the wall had reappeared on the cradle's edge, open to a page I hadn't dared read before. The naming, written in trembling ink, the ritual described a moment all the marked mothers faced, the night the child within demanded its name. Not a name chosen by humans, but one revealed by the house itself, the true name that carried power, ancestry, prophecy. And if the name was wrong, the birth would not complete. I read it again and again. Then I turned to the mirror. The surface rippled like water, and then the women appeared again. This time, closer. Their eyes were no longer just watching. They were waiting. And one by one, they began to whisper names. Names I couldn't understand. Not at first. But then, a single word formed clearly, spoken by the youngest among them, a girl barely 16, with ash on her cheeks and her hands resting over a distended belly just like mine. Oreas. The moment she said it, the house responded. The floor groaned beneath me. The flame surged higher. The hum returned, not angry this time, but harmonic like music in the bones of the walls. Even the window panes began to vibrate with invisible force. Oreas, I whispered aloud, placing a hand on my stomach. The child kicked 3 times. In agreement. The mark on my collarbone glowed bright gold. And, just like that, it was sealed. His name. His purpose. The book closed on its own and the pages turned to ash. The cradle stopped rocking. Outside my door, I heard Meredith crying. Not loudly. Not performatively. Not out of fear. Out of regret. She was unraveling. The house had forced her to see not just me, but herself. The mother she became. The wife she chose to be. The cruel woman who saw my suffering as her sport. And the mirror must have shown her more than memories. It must have shown her the future. Because when I opened the door, quietly, without warning, she was kneeling at the end of the hallway. Alone. Barefoot. Her hands covering her ears like she was trying to unhear what she had seen. She looked up when she felt me. And for the first time since I moved in, she called me by name. Not hag. Not parasite. Evelyn, she whispered. What is it? What are you carrying? I stared at her calmly. Hope, I said. And justice. Then I closed the door again. Behind it, the cradle glowed. The birth was coming. And with it, everything they had tried to bury. I awoke to red light pouring into the room. At first, I thought it was fire. But when I pulled back the curtain, I saw the sky, thick, pulsing red like an open wound. The moon hung low, swollen and veiled in blood. The old women in the mirror had warned me of this. The night of unveiling. The night the veil between what was and what is becoming tears like thin silk. The birth would happen soon. I lit the last candle. It sparked instantly, its flame tall and furious. The cradle glowed again. But this time, it began to levitate, just an inch or 2, hovering above the floor in stillness. The feather, the stone, the cloth, they had all vanished. Left only light behind. The house groaned deeply. A long, guttural sound that came from its foundation. Walls trembled. Window panes moaned. A painting down the hall crashed to the floor and split in half. And then I heard them. Footsteps. But not from one person. 3. They were coming. I moved to the door, not out of fear, but readiness. When I opened it, Gerald was standing alone in the hallway. He looked thinner. Broken in ways no man can hide. He didn't speak at first. Then, she's gone. My breath caught. Meredith. He nodded. She left at dawn. Took nothing. Said the house had chosen its truth. She didn't want to be here when it finished. I felt no anger. No satisfaction. Only stillness. Like something heavy had been lifted. She saw what it needed her to see, I whispered. He looked at me, truly looked for the first time in years. His eyes softened, brimming with something I didn't expect. Guilt. Regret. Even awe. Is it really happening? He asked, his voice barely audible. Is there really a child? I nodded once. And it's not just a child, is it? No, I said. He's everything you cast out of this house. Everything you buried in me. Everything they silenced in the women before me. The air shifted again. Lance stepped out from behind the staircase. He looked different too, paler, quieter. No sneer. No swagger. Just a young man who had seen too much too soon. He stared at me like a man seeing the sun after years in the dark. I had a dream, he said quietly. She had wings. You were in fire. The baby was light. That wasn't a dream, I replied. That was memory. He didn't move. But he didn't run either. I turned back toward my room. You can stay, I said over my shoulder. But when the time comes, you cannot speak. Not a word. The house is listening now, and it doesn't forgive noise from the undeserving. The floor shivered once more beneath my feet. The red moon grew brighter through the window. And inside me, Aureas stirred. Not in pain, but in preparation. The contractions began that night, quiet at first, like distant thunder under calm skies. I didn't scream. I didn't panic. I sat upright on the edge of the bed, both hands on my belly, breathing deeply. The air was thick with the scent of salt and candle wax. The walls around me pulsed faintly, alive now, no longer just beams and paint, but skin. The house had become part of me, or I of it. And it was ready too. Aureas kicked again. This time, the movement wasn't random. It traveled through my body like a ripple in a pond. My veins lit up faintly beneath my skin, lines of soft gold trailing down my arms, across my chest and over my womb. My fingertips tingled. I stood, lightheaded but steady. The mirror reflected not a woman in labor, but a vessel becoming flame. Behind me, the cradle hovered silently. The candlelight had turned to white fire, no smoke, no scent, just purity. I was no longer alone in the room. The women were with me now, not only in the mirror, but surrounding me, invisible but present. I felt their hands on my back, my shoulders, my neck. Gentle, steady, empowering. Downstairs, Gerald whispered to Lance, "Do you feel that?" "I feel everything," Lance replied. The ground shifted again, this time not with anger, but ceremony. A great exhale from the earth itself. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Aureas, I am ready." The name ignited something. My stomach contracted powerfully, but there was no agony, only light. It moved through me, not breaking, but opening. The mark on my collarbone flared. And then, I heard it, his first sound. Not a cry, not a scream. A note. A single, soft, perfect tone, like the first chime of a cathedral bell at dawn. The cradle lit up from within. Not from the outside world, but from him. I lowered myself to the floor, guided not by pain, but instinct. I didn't need doctors. I didn't need steel or masks or monitors. I needed only silence. And belief. Outside the door, Gerald approached, but stopped. As if someone, held him back. He wept softly, not out of fear, but repentance. I placed my hands on the floor, breath steady, and the light beneath my skin pulsed faster now, one with the house, with the child, with every woman who came before me. And as another wave of energy surged through me, the window cracked from the pressure of prophecy. The birth had begun. The room dimmed. Not with darkness, but with gravity. The kind that pulls stars into place. The kind that makes knees buckle before ancient things. I was no longer Evelyn Mareaux, 63, forgotten widow in her brother's house. I was the gate. And he, Aureas, was the key. The light beneath my skin pulsed faster now, with each contraction wrapping around me like ribbons of heat. I lowered myself beside the cradle, sweatless, breathless, fully aware and wholly surrendered. I did not scream. I did not curse. The pain that came was not meant to punish, it was meant to carve. To make space in my body for something the world had tried to forget. A child that did not belong to science or superstition or shame. My spine arched. The flame in the candle went horizontal, then shot straight into the ceiling and vanished. And from my mouth came a sound I didn't recognize, a chant. Old. Not mine. A language my tongue had never known, but my soul had spoken long before this life. Behind me, the walls expanded outward and then retracted like breath. And then came stillness. A weight in my arms. Not heavy. Not fragile. Perfect. I looked down. He wasn't covered in blood. No screams, no mess. Just light. Pure, golden light where skin should be flickering faintly like the last fire on the last cold night. Eyes wide. Silent. And watching me. He didn't cry. He didn't need to. The house fell silent around us. Even the air seemed to stop moving. Then, slowly, the women appeared again. All of them. This time not in the mirror, but in the room itself. Ghosts, maybe? Spirits, maybe not. They circled the cradle and sang, a harmony older than language, made from memory and forgiveness. Lance was at the door. He had not entered. But he had not looked away either. He stared at the light coming from my arms like a boy who had only just realized the world was more than dirt and fists. Gerald stood behind him, hand on his son's shoulder, weeping silently. For a moment, we were all together. Not as monsters or victims, but as witnesses. I looked down at my son, because that's what he was, and whispered, "You are not revenge. You are restoration." And, for the first time, he smiled. For hours after Oreas was born, the house did not move. It didn't creak or shift or groan like old houses tend to do. It held its breath, wrapped in the stillness of sacred things. A cradle rocked. My heart slowed. My bones, though old, did not ache. The weight of childbirth, real, ancient, raw, had left no wound. Only presence. He lay in my arms, radiating warmth not just of body, but of memory. When I looked into his eyes, I saw women long buried and forgotten. I saw babies burned from wombs in times when being born different meant being born doomed. I saw whispers turned into prayers and prayers that went unanswered. Until now, he was the answer. The window, cracked by prophecy, now glowed gently with gold light. Outside, the blood moon had faded. The sun began to rise, but it was hesitant, as if even the sky wasn't sure it should dare interrupt. I sat on the floor beside the floating cradle. The women had vanished. The mirror had stilled. And yet I felt them. Still here. Still watching. Not to control me, but to bless me. Down the hall, Gerald spoke quietly to Lance. "She's changed. Something in her. It's not broken anymore." "She was never broken," Lance replied. "We just never listened." I heard every word. The house made sure of that. When Gerald finally approached my door, he paused once more at the threshold. The same place he'd stood when he first told me to leave. The same space where Meredith whispered her venom. The same frame that had marked the boundary of my exile. But now it was a gate. He stepped in and knelt. "I'm sorry," he said, "for locking you away, for not believing, for not protecting you when I should have." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Oreas lifted one hand, impossibly small, and touched Gerald's wrist. Just a single touch, and Gerald wept. The kind of weeping that comes from generations of silence finally cracking open. The kind of weeping that waters forgiveness. I turned toward him. "You don't owe me," I said. "You owe them. The women who came before me. The ones whose names never made it past whispered rumors." He nodded. "I'll remember them." "And you'll raise him?" I asked. He looked stunned. You're trusting me? I'm offering you a chance to become something other than what you were. A witness. A guardian. A man who remembers instead of erasing." He wiped his face and looked at my son. "I'll protect him. With everything I have left." I placed Oreas in the cradle. He didn't cry. He closed his eyes. And for the first time since I entered this house, I rested. I woke 3 days later to sunlight unlike any I had ever seen. It wasn't bright, it was warm, gentle, forgiving. It poured through the window like honey, touching every surface of the room, every forgotten photograph, every crack in the walls, and made it beautiful again. Oreyes was already awake, lying in the cradle, eyes open, calm. He never cried. He never had to. The house heard him without sound, responded without command. He was already part of it. Gerald entered carrying warm tea, something he hadn't done for me in decades. His hands were still rough, but his face had softened. Age suited him better now that it wasn't wrapped in shame. He didn't sleep all night, he said quietly. But he never made a sound. Just looked at me. He sees everything, I replied. Even what we try to hide. Lance had changed, too. He didn't leave the house. Didn't slam doors. Didn't sneer. He spent his time in the nursery upstairs, restoring it, repainting the walls. He found the old photos, the ones Meredith had hidden, and began asking questions. About the women. About me. He no longer wanted to erase our past. He wanted to understand it. The house had grown still, but not empty. Every beam, every window pane, every floorboard hummed softly beneath our feet. The mirrors had returned, replaced themselves, somehow, and when I passed them now, I saw not a reflection, but roots. Deep and unshakable. I wasn't afraid anymore. I didn't have to be, because what began in me would not end in me. This child, my son, my gift, was not here to avenge. He was here to remember, to carry the songs of the silenced, to protect those who bore weight without witness. And as I sat by the window with Oreyes in my arms, wrapped in the red cloth from the cradle, I whispered his story into the wind, knowing the world would hear it in its own time. I was Evelyn Mareaux. I was forgotten. I was imprisoned. I was mocked. And then, I was chosen. The house creaked once, soft, like a bow on strings. Oreyes smiled. And the light grew. Not in the sky, not in the room. Within us. Forever. Here the story ends. Thanks for watching. Hit like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more true tales and real stories.